folks, if you had the opportunity to see Hamilton, you may well have seen today's guest perform the quite unforgettable role of King George, which just saying it brings a smile and a laugh. It's a hell of a role. He also originated the role of Elder McKinley in the musical Book of Mormon, which opened in 2011. And about him and that role, Ben Brantley had something to say himself. The role is destined to make a star of lead singer and dancer Rory O'Malley. Now that's pretty good, and I'd say that guy has a pretty good eye. He earned a Drama Desk Award and a Tony Award for that role. So
a nomination, yes, nomination.
A nomination.
I didn't win, although my mom probably leaves out that detail every time she talks about it.
Listen, dude, it sounds pretty good to me, and you deserve a lot of credit for that. And it was a hell of a production. He currently is the host of a wonderful podcast called Geffen Playhouse Unscripted, which we're going to talk about that as well. So with that, I'm happy and honored to introduce to you my friend and colleague and peer, Rory O'Malley. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me on. That was quite the introduction. I was like, after this year, it's like, oh yeah, I am an actor. I have acted. You forget after this year.
Yeah. But you've been on the podcast. I know you have your own podcast.
Right.
Okay. So you're hosting a podcast that I just mentioned, Geffen Playhouse Unscripted.
Right.
Really nice, interesting interview style podcast. But the nice thing is, I know you were doing your own
correct
original podcast that you called Living the Dream.
Right.
And I know the throes of producing your own podcast.
Yeah, you do.
And the nice thing was that transition, which I believe was in the beginning of 2019. A lot of the subject matter is the same darn format. And you have the opportunity to continue those interviews and your style of those interviews, talk about a lot of the same stuff you were talking about on your own podcast, but you have the platform and the company of the Geffen Playhouse behind you, which is really nice.
Yes. No, I am so lucky. It's a crazy thing. And, I love podcasting and I love having conversations with other artists, and especially actors. I think it's such an important part of being an artist is as talking to other artists about their experience. It's the only way I've been able to keep at this, because you list all the good times when you introduce me. You don't list all the bad times. You don't list like how, my waiting jobs, my getting fired from temp jobs, my, callbacks that I worked so hard on and didn't get. So I wanted to have conversations with performers that were long form and that were about the ups and downs of the business, not just the surface level curated Instagram, social media, especially for young people, because they look at what we do and they see you on the stage in Hamilton and they think, oh boy, I want to be an actor too. That looks like fun. And my heart just leaps like, oh no, don't think this is all that being an actor is being on the stage in Hamilton. Yeah. And so I was lucky enough to, sit down with a lot of people who I respect, especially in the Broadway world, and start to have conversations with them. And I didn't know what I was doing with podcasting. I had just my phone, I just started recording with my phone and having those intimate conversations in dressing rooms and people's homes. And I got better and better at it. And then my husband and I, we moved to Los Angeles, and I was doing Hamilton out here in Los Angeles, and had a child. We adopted a baby boy who's 2.5 now. And that is a challenge. and
noticed.
Yeah. And so I tried for a while to continue producing the podcast on my own. But, when you tell your spouse, like, oh, I got to go talk to an actor for an hour and then, edit and do all these other things, it became my time, just became so valuable. Right. And so what was wonderful is that I went to do the podcast for the Geffen Playhouse, and Gil Cates Jr. was the nicest, greatest man in the whole world. Our director over there, he had me as a guest. And afterwards I said, hey, if you ever need a guest host, I'm, available. And they had producers who were putting the whole thing together. So I started collaborating, and you're right. You're absolutely right. I realize that they have all these wonderful performers and artists coming through their doors. And I could have the same kind of conversations that I was having with people on my own. And that way I have help. And, we've taken some time off during the pandemic because the theater's been closed, but I've been able to continue to have those conversations. And what's been nice is that I'm doing more podcasts like yours and reaching out to other podcasters. And now that theater is figuring out a way to get back up on its feet, I'm excited to jump back in, and the Geffen is also ready to have live performances.
And
again.
It seems like a great home. And I don't know Gil Cates Jr., but I know I've known of that family for a while because I've been in and out of the production business. They seem like very nice people. It seems like a really nice home base for you.
It's amazing. I would say I only feel at home when I know there's a theater close by that I can walk into and everybody knows my name. It's like Cheers, like I need that pub. I'm an Irishman, that's my pub, is walking into a theater, into a lobby, and people know, are like, you belong here, Rory. This is your home. And, when I was growing up, that was Beck Center in Cleveland, Ohio. And when I was in New York, that was the Eugene O'Neill Theater where Book of Mormon was, or the Richard Rodgers where Hamilton is. And here, I was so lucky when I first moved to Los Angeles to work for Garry Marshall. And I worked across the street at the Irish pub, Timmy Nolan's, and did plays for him at night, which was the Falcon Theater, now the Garry Marshall Theater since he passed away. And having that home was so important to me. And to now live on the west side of Los Angeles and have the Geffen Playhouse be so close by, and to get to participate and be, it's a clear trend. I need a theater to survive.
Well, it occurred to me, Rory, that, look, we made the leap and went into this crazy business, right? It's about communication and storytelling. I mean, It is when you've been in it a couple decades, you start to realize that. So wait a minute, you gotta communicate. You have to tell stories, and you have to be out there doing something. And I got to tell you, year and a half, 2 years ago, I barely knew what a podcast was.
Yeah.
But I started listening to them, and some are good and some are not. Right. And I said, that's kind of interesting. Forum there. It's a real opportunity to do just what you're talking about, to interact with, you get to do it with people in your industry. And I like the idea of that so much that I started this. This is a second podcast. This is sort of a companion podcast to my initial podcast, which is Island, which is a very strict, structured history of New York going back to Henry Hudson. But
yeah, I love it.
And by the way, I love doing this, is what I discovered. I had no idea how much I would like doing this, but there is something about interacting and communicating. And I love being able to talk to people in the business, because it's funny. I don't talk to actors that much.
Yeah.
When you're on set, there's a limited amount of time you even get to talk to them. And then, I'm always running home. I got kids like you do, and I got a wife, and I don't hang around anymore. Earlier, years ago, decades ago, I might have hung around.
Yeah. No, I totally get it. And it's, like you used to, it's funny, if you're in a play or you're, working on a set, people think after you're done, you're all headed to the bar to celebrate the day's work, when no, you really had a long day. You're just going home and trying to get ready to wake up at 6 a.m. again to get back to the set or to the theater. So it is amazing to pause and to sit down for a long conversation with another human being. Like we haven't spoken in this way before, but we already know each other. We already know what our experiences are, and to get to remind ourselves that we're not alone in this journey being actors in this business. There's an artistic side to it. There's a mental health side to it. There's, a benefit, I should say. It's fantastic. I always joke that I started a podcast with actors because it's cheaper than therapy. It's great to be able to sit down and say, like, this is what I'm going through. Are you going through this too? And my podcasting definitely focuses on that, because I want people who I worked in a restaurant with or worked in a temp job with, who were actors, to hear my story, and to have those people who, when I was working in a restaurant, I didn't know that other actors who were working on Broadway or in TV and film had, done what I had done.
Mhm.
And that is part of the dream. That is part of the plan, feeding yourself until you get a break. And you might have to go back to that place after your break. I was working on Broadway and then went back to my temp job after that. And that's normal. That's part of what we do. And I guess for me, I just really wanted to relay that message to all the artists out there who were struggling in feeling alone in that.
Yep. And I think it's an important part of society today. People need to talk to each other a little bit more.
Yeah,
right? And nice to be able to do that. It's
for
awesome.
sure.
Tell me about Garry Marshall. That guy
Oh
sounds like
man.
something else, man. I wish I had worked for him.
Oh man, he was the best. He was the absolute best.
I
Now,
believe it.
I knew who he was because of, seeing him on TV and film. And I guess
Right.
I knew that he had something to do with Happy Days and all those TV shows, but
He had
he
something to
was,
do with it. Yeah.
yeah, right. I mean, I knew all those shows, but I
Yeah.
knew him as the actor, and I
Yeah.
knew he was Penny Marshall's brother. And I moved out to Los Angeles, and I didn't know, I had a cousin out here, but I didn't know too many people. And I auditioned for a play at his theater called Snoopy. I was playing Charlie Brown. I
Right.
got this
Yeah.
part. And at the callbacks, I walk in and there's Garry Marshall. And I couldn't believe it. I thought, well, I
How you
didn't know.
doing, kid? What's up?
Gary, how you doing? And he
Uh,
is just,
what's he like?
he was so full of life, so giving, so wonderful. He surrounded himself with amazing, wonderful people. So, you had a lot of people who showed up to work, not always for a lot of money, but because they got to work with Garry.
Yeah.
And, that's why, the end of his career, he was able to do these huge movies like Valentine's Day and New Year's Eve, because all of these huge stars signed on.
Yeah.
They didn't sign on because they were going to make a ton of money. They signed on because they were going to get to work with Garry. And they knew that that was going to be a party. They knew that it was going to be joy. And that's how I would describe working with Garry, just joyful at all times. And Garry was the guy that, when my mom, from, a single mom from Cleveland, Ohio, her son moves to Los Angeles and New York, like it's just outside of her realm of thinking, like, how are you going to survive? How are you going to do this? So when I got one of my first jobs with Garry doing that, and then eventually did Happy Days, the musical for him, I played Richie Cunningham.
Mm.
I was his singing Ron Howard. She would come to visit and Garry would treat her like gold. He knew. And in fact, here's a funny story for you. There was a song that I had with one of my very, very good friends, still to this day, Anna White. She played Lori Beth, my girlfriend in Happy Days, the musical. And we had this duet. And Garry, one day when we were in previews, Paul Williams was writing the music, and, things change in previews. He takes me and Anna aside and he said, "All right, you guys are amazing. You're so good in that number. Have both of your moms come to see it?" And we said, "Yeah, Garry, our mom saw it." They go, "Oh, good, because we're cutting the number. It's getting out of the show." And, he was like, but he wanted to make sure our mom saw it, that. And he's
beautiful.
He was such like a TV and film guy who had this theater, and he loved Broadway and theater stuff. He was directing Happy Days at that time, and he would rehearse with us, and we'd get up on the stage and he'd block something and he'd go, "And action." I was like, "Garry, there are no cameras here. You don't have to say action." He was very, from that world.
Yeah.
And, he always had a story about Robin Williams or Penny Marshall, his sister, or the man was love. And I don't know, I don't know if I would have made it through my early 20s if I hadn't been had him as a mentor, and had him be my place to call home.
So awesome. The fact that you had the opportunity to work with a legend like that, it's worth. It makes a lot of the, you know, struggle in this business worth it
Yeah.
when you get to someone like that and you get to glean some of what they got.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah. Oh, and I'm just so glad that I realized that right away too. I wasn't taking it for granted. I was in awe of him and the kind of person that he was. And to have that be somebody who you meet in New York or LA, I don't care where you are. There's a lot of people that you might admire. You meet them, you don't want to see them for a second day. Like it can be disappointing. As they say, don't meet your idols, but your heroes. But Garry was not like that. Garry was creating a family, and he welcomed me, and his actual family welcomed me, and they really they're the best. So I could gush and go on, but he made some of the greatest entertainment in the last 50 years. And he entertained this country in a way that was completely free of any kind of pretense, or he certainly was not uppity about like, whatever made people laugh was good enough for Garry. And I love that. I love that he was just about entertaining the masses, and he never worried about criticism. He never worried about what the critics were thinking. He just wanted to make people laugh.
That is so beautiful. And the working with a guy who's been in the business 5 decades, maybe more, 6 decades,
Yeah,
5 to 6
probably.
decades,
Yeah.
and discovering what a beautiful guy he is, and the way he runs his sets, and the way he treats people is such a valuable lesson. And it's such a valuable gift to receive in this jungle of a business where you get a lot of people can be not so nice and not so ethical and not so endearing. And I remember when I met and worked for Clint Eastwood, that's the exact same feeling I got. I said, "Oh my God, this guy is like he's like a gift from God. He's so incredibly, sincere and professional and just nice to people." And you figure a legend like that, or Garry Marshall, if they wanted to be jerks,
Right.
you could sort of like, well, they've been around a while, they put up with a lot of stuff, but they're
Right.
such nice old school people.
So
It's
nice.
so nice. They really
I realized that, I wonder about that, because then you meet like the jerk or the person who is not nice, and they don't even have a tenth.
Did you meet the jerk?
Oh, I've met. Oh, yeah.
I think I met him too.
Yeah. But like people who haven't even done a tenth of what Garry did, acting like they're owed so much, or treating people like dirt. I realize that I think a lot of people who act like that think that that's how you earn respect, or that's somehow how people who accomplish things act, when no, people who have actually accomplished things, they have nothing to prove. They have nothing to prove, because their career is speaking for itself. And, that was definitely Garry.
Absolutely. And there's an element of wisdom to it that just, when you're doing good things and you're doing it the right way, it all just works, and you, like you say, you don't need to prove anything.
Right.
Wow, that's beautiful. I'm so happy you got to work for him. And those stories are just wonderful. Tell me about Hamilton. That must have been something too.
Yeah, no, it was wild. Well, I mean, I had worked in New York for years. I did the Book of Mormon, and I had done, some off Broadway stuff. And I love New York City. It's the greatest city in the world for sure, as Hamilton, the musical, states. But I had gotten married. I told my husband, that I had worked for Garry in Los Angeles, and we had been there in New York for 10 years. But I said, if we want to have a kid, I think we should try LA. And I was working on this television show with Kelsey Grammer and Martin Lawrence. And so I convinced him to move to Los Angeles. And now he's from Indianapolis. We're both Midwest boys, but he loves New York. He loves New York probably more than me. Okay. I have to be honest. Like, he loves that city, and I got him to leave it. I got him to leave his friends, and I said, you're going to love Los Angeles. There's great people here. We'll just try it. We show up to Los Angeles, and I got this call that they were doing a new Broadway show about Steve Jobs and Bill Gates called Nerds. And I was asked to play Bill Gates. And it was the same season as Hamilton. Hamilton had just been opening on Broadway. And I was like, that's crazy. And it came out of nowhere. I said, all right, honey, you stay here in Los Angeles. I'm going to go do this Broadway show. Who knows? It may only last a month. Like, that's how Broadway is.
You don't know.
You never know. Well, it lasted less than a month. It didn't even get to the starting gate. We showed up and rehearsed for 2 weeks, and the producer walks into 2 weeks into rehearsals and says, everyone has to go home. An investor dropped out. We will not be opening up on Broadway. It was like devastating. People had left their restaurant jobs for their Broadway debuts. And I was like, all right, well, I guess I'm going back to LA. I fly back to LA. I was so upset. My husband, I remember he bought me Bruce Springsteen tickets, and even that didn't cheer me up. I was just like, like when something like that happens, I was about to be on Broadway, and I remember thinking, I almost was on Broadway in the same season as Hamilton. I thought, like, just to have been on Broadway while that show was going on would have felt so wonderful.
Right.
Well, I'm home in Los Angeles for 2 days, and my agent calls. She goes, Rory, how would you feel about coming back to New York and doing another Broadway show? And I said, oh, I don't know if I can do it. I'm just heartbroken. And she said, well, what if it's to play the king in Hamilton?
Well,
and I said,
case.
I'll be on the red eye. I'll be right there. And she literally said, well, do you want, they're asking if you want to do it. Do you want to talk to Gerald before? And I said, no, I'll text my husband when I get to New York.
Amazing.
I was floored. And here, the casting director for the show that imploded was the casting director for Hamilton. She saw our last run through of the show in the rehearsal space. So she knew I was funny, and she certainly knew I was free. So Jonathan Groff left the show out of the blue to go do David Fincher's Mindhunter. So he left about 4 months early, before the show had been nominated for any Tony Awards or anything had happened. And so it really was out of the blue. It's not like everyone was wondering who's going to replace Jonathan Groff. And within days, I was back in New York rehearsing for the King. And within 2 weeks of the day I got to New York, I was on stage and had taken over for Jonathan Groff. It was a whirlwind experience.
What a role, man. Tell me about playing King George. That version of King George.
It's incredible, and it's something that, like, I hope I get to do for the rest of my life, because I love it so much. I want to be in Hamilton as long as they'll take me. It's amazing, because a lot of times, you have to find a role within yourself, and usually a role is pretty close to you. King George III is nothing like me. Nothing. I mean, I am such a dork. There's nothing regal about me. And I truly feel like this is the first time I've ever played a character where I felt that the character changed me as a person. When you, for better or for worse, I don't know, but when you 8 times a week walk out onto a stage wearing a crown and the audience applauds, and they don't, there might be some people who know it's me, the actor, but they're not applauding for me. They're applauding for the King. That entrance is so fantastic. And when you walk out to that, you start to hold yourself like a king. And I'm sure my husband would, say that my head was getting too big for that crown, but it really did it forced me to own space, to walk into rooms and hold my head high and not be shy, because it just felt so good to walk onto a stage and have that kind of a welcome all the time. And I miss it. It's been a very quiet year in the pandemic without any entrance applause, but it's the greatest part I'll ever get to play. And I don't say that because, you know, I'm not going to get to do really cool things, but the King in Hamilton is a delicious treat of a role. It's also 20 minutes of work. So it's never exhausting.
Mm-hmm.
It is the biggest challenge of it is that you're backstage looking at all your friends on stage and just thinking, put me in, coach, put me in, you know, just once I want to jump into, you know, one of, you know, Satisfied or something. But it's a total dream.
What another, that also is such a gift to be able to receive that role at just the way you talk about it with such pleasure and great regard, that it's such a gift to play that role. That's fabulous. That's some of the payback, I think.
Yeah.
All the, you know,
waiting on tables and filing at a temp job. You bet. Yep. You bet. That's what I think, like, thank God I had those experiences of, you know, getting tipped 1 penny after being a terrible server, you know, or having to deal with, you know, waking up and looking for work at temp jobs. I am so grateful for that, especially now, because I'm having a better experience as a working actor because of it. 100%. And so, you know, like walking into that experience, I was working all of a sudden with Lin-Manuel Miranda, you know, with Christopher Jackson and the entire original cast, Daveed Diggs. And by the way, my buddy, Leslie Odom Jr., who was just nominated for an Oscar this past Sunday, we went to college together in Pittsburgh. We went to Carnegie Mellon, and to get to see him up close and personal as Burr, who I saw him do it at the Public, and that's how I knew what the show was. And I knew he was going to win a Tony. I knew that it was going to change his life in such a profound way. But to get to be a part of the final 3 months of his playing that role, it was a privilege. It was a privilege. Like every
with the
moment
guy
felt
you
like
trained
that.
with at Carnegie Mellon, one of your buddies.
Right? Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
That must have been something.
Yeah. It was real full circle.
Great reward. And he was great. He was great in that role. And now you have another friend from Carnegie Mellon, Josh Gad.
That's
who
right.
You were in Book of Mormon with.
Yeah. Yeah. No, Josh Gad, myself and Leslie Odom Jr., we were all in college together at the same time, same class. And, you know, it's like a dozen people in every class. So we were together for 4 years. And Josh and I did the Book of Mormon together. We also did another Broadway show before that called Spelling Bee at the same time. My first time going on in Broadway, my Broadway debut, was when I was understudying Josh, and he missed a show and I went on for Josh. So we were also roommates in college. So I can't get away from Josh Gad or Leslie. But they're pretty fantastic people to be joined at the hip with.
That's really great, man. What a great story. Tell us a little bit about your experiences living in New York. What do you like and remember about New York and working in New York?
Well, you know, New York, as I said, is the greatest city in the world. But there's something about the city that makes me feel alive in a way that no other place has ever.
Yeah. What do you think that is?
I think it's because you know, I can still feel the city waking up, getting your coffee, getting ready to go, getting on the subway and saying, bring it on. You know, not like whatever's coming my way today, I'm ready for it, or I'll find a way to be ready for it. It's an accomplishment to get your laundry done in New York. You know, like it's everything is, you know, a struggle, but also everything feels satisfying. And you are in the center of the universe. And you're also in the center of not just the acting world, you're in the center of every business's world.
I talk about it in this current episode of Island, which is episode 6. We go 7 seasons per episode, so we're almost done with this first season. And I mentioned to a minister at the church, the Marble Collegiate Church, which is actually the church that Domini Michaelius formed in 1628, which is amazing.
Wow.
And I said, it's almost as if there's an energy in New York that affects people once they get here and sort of inspires them to go to these new heights and these new levels. And it's almost like a vibration, like what you're talking about. You go out and you almost can feel it, right?
Yeah. And I think it can be unsettling for some people. I mean, you know, like some people are like, I just want to like relax and chill. And, you know, this is too much for me. But I needed to be around that. I was, you know, growing up, I needed to be around people who wanted to be on stage and to perform as much as I did. And New York is the only place that comes close to that vibration, that energy that I have. And, you know, even Los Angeles, which has a lot of performers and people, but you don't feel that, you know, it's so spaced out and it's not the same drive. In New York, you can sense that everybody's waking up and they worked really hard to get there and they're not going to waste today. Yep. We all worked too hard. We all worked too damn hard to get here, to get to the apartment we're in, to get to this group of friends. We fought to find each other. We're going to take care of each other. You know, people always say that, you know, New Yorkers are rude or whatever. I've never, ever thought that New Yorkers were rude. New Yorkers are rude in the sense that like, you grow up with like 6 siblings and you're saying like, oh, my sibling was rude to me today. No, they're your brother. Yeah, they might have bumped you in, you know, in the hallway, but like we're all in that journey together to getting through the day in New York.
It's a serious place, and
it is.
You know, it's game on in New York.
Yeah.
So being assertive is not being rude, but you got to be pretty assertive and pretty straight, you know, pretty direct in New York to make it through a day.
Well, I always joke that I'm just so like Ohio bumpkin and just always with a smile on my face with a backpack walking down New York City that people always thought I just got off the tour bus. Like even after 10 years of living there, people were like, oh, look at this guy. You know, I never really got that kind of New York street cred of like, oh, this guy's been here a while. He knows what he's doing.
But this is what New York is about. And I sincerely believe this. New York, since people started coming there from Europe in 1621, 2, 3, it's been about diversity and tolerance. And that's a fact. And it's because of that, it's become a breeding ground for all sorts of ideas and ideals and people and pursuits. And I know that you've been active with gay rights, among other things. And listen, I mean, this is one of the best platforms for that kind of pursuit. Am I right?
Absolutely. Yeah. No, it was one of the greatest honors of my life to get to be a part of the fight for marriage equality in the gay rights movement in New York. It was, I think around 2007, 2008, I had gone home to Cleveland, Ohio, and I was working on the Obama campaign, just volunteering, learning about how to community organize. And I was with my family, you know, a bunch of Irish Democrats on the west side of Cleveland. And it was a wonderful experience just in learning how to have a dialogue with people and learning how to community organize. And I came back to New York and Prop 8 had passed in California, overturning marriage equality, saying that gay people had to stop getting married in California. And it was devastating because everyone felt like we were making progress. But if it could be stopped in California, then we realized that we couldn't take it for granted. We were going to have to work really hard for it. And, I say the best thing that happened to the gay rights movement was Barack Obama being elected president, just in the sense that that was something that an African-American being elected president felt like it was impossible, and the possible happened. And also Prop 8 passing, because Prop 8 was something that we thought wouldn't pass, and it did. And we realized that we were going to have to work incredibly hard to bring marriage equality about. And, I was dating my now husband at the time. I knew that I wanted to be married with a kid. That's like that's all I want, is to have a family. And so it was really important to me. And so we started to organize the Broadway community around the fight for marriage equality, specifically in New York. We did letter writing campaigns. We had a rally where the mayor and the governor came and spoke, and we had Broadway folks like Audra McDonald and Cynthia Nixon came, and a ton of folks showed up. And the Broadway community, when there's a cause, they are always so vocal. They are so giving of their time. And, you talk about like Broadway Cares, Equity Fights AIDS. They've raised tens of millions of dollars over the last dozen to 20 years. I am so proud to be a part of that community because of the good that they've done, the social work that they've done for the Actors Fund. It's incredible, and it makes you feel like what we do is so selfish so much of the time. We're always working for ourselves, trying to sell ourselves. We're the product. But when you get to be a part of something like, the gay rights movement with them, or Broadway Cares, it's just such an incredible thing.
Something that really makes a difference. It sounds like that spirit really got inside you from Manhattan, didn't it?
It did. Oh, it did. Yeah.
That's fabulous. Good for you, Rory. Good for you. So tell me what's coming up.
Well, it's been amazing because I was back with the crown on my head. I was on March 11th. We had our final dress rehearsal. And on March 12th of 2020, that's why I'm in Los Angeles. We were going to open up another production of Hamilton.
Right.
And of course, it got shut down on March 12th. So we never had our first show. So the set's sitting there at the Pantages, my costume sitting in the dressing room for over a year now. And so, I hope that is what's next for sure. As the king says, what comes next? Mm-hmm. So I'm hoping that's what's next. But what I'm so grateful for is voiceover work. Sitting in front of these microphones this year has been so important. And I've been able to do a couple of projects that I can't announce yet because animation takes forever.
Fair enough.
To come out. Yep, it's been like over a year.
Cooking though. Yeah. Good.
Yeah. But also I've been doing like episodes of Bob's Burgers and Family Guy and American Dad. And I did a bunch of episodes of a show I'm very proud of called Central Park on Apple TV, Apple Plus. And that is produced by my good buddy, Josh Gad, and also stars Leslie Odom Jr. Because, we stick together, like I said.
Yeah, you got to do it, man.
It's like a musical. It's a musical animated show. So there's a bunch of songs in it, and there's a bunch of Broadway people in it. It's amazing. So definitely check that out. Season 2 is coming out, I think, in June, but all of season 1 is up on Apple Plus.
That's wonderful. Good for you, buddy. You're staying very busy. Well, Rory O'Malley, you yourself are a piece of New York's incredible history. You're a wonderful young man. And I want to say this, nobody handed you anything. You clearly earned what you got. And that's why I think you have such good values, and you can recognize the good people along the way. And that's really what it's all about. And you're doing great work for Broadway Cares and the Actors Fund. And I commend you.
Well, thank you so much. And, if I could just tell one quick story, because because this is like a New York discussion, and I want to encourage any parents out there who have kids who love Broadway or theater or performing to make the investment of taking them to New York, especially now. It can be expensive. I know that it's not easy to get your kids and get young people to New York City and to see Broadway shows, but my mom, a single mom, She brought me there. We stayed at the Milford Plaza, a big M on top, on 45th Street. And it changed my life. I know how hard my mom worked to get me to New York for that trip. I begged her for years. It was life-changing. And now I'm not saying that your kids are going to be on Broadway. I'm not saying that they have to, go the same route that I did, but I can guarantee you that if you bring a kid to New York, their minds will expand and their possibilities will expand. And that vibration and that energy that we were just talking about is something that's going to stay with them no matter what, whether they come back to New York or not. New York's an amazing place of so many possibilities, and I'll never forget it. It's not called the Milford Plaza anymore, but you can.
I know.
You can
I remember
there.
the commercials.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, Rory. Well, this has been so much fun. So I just want to remind people that they can look for you on Central Park, which is available at Apple Plus. And you can be seen there with your buddies, Leslie Odom Jr. and Josh Gad, three pretty good actors there.
That's right.
We all going to keep our fingers crossed out in LA that production of Hamilton starts up again and we get to see you as King George out there. And I think we're going to see that. So we're all going to keep our fingers crossed for that one. And in the meantime, everybody can hear Rory on his wonderful podcast, Geffen Playhouse Unscripted. And you definitely want to tune into that. Some great guests on that, by the way. I love the one with the gal from Saturday Night Live who played Pat. She was great.
Oh, yes. No, I mean, we have so many wonderful people, we've gotten to talk to. I feel very lucky. Yeah,
it's a really nice podcast. Wonderful, buddy. So thank you so much for taking the time. It's great talking to you. And I'm sure Marnie will be very happy to see this podcast. And
she sure will.
It's great to see you. Keep it up. Keep it up.
Thank you so much. Good to see you too.
You got it, buddy. We'll talk soon.
Okay. Bye.
Bye-bye. Rory O'Malley, ladies and gentlemen. What a great kid. If you want to delve deeper into the history of Manhattan, the incredible history of Manhattan from 1609 to 1909, then you must join us for our primary podcast, Island, available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and all major podcast directories. Climb aboard. History is cool. Folks, we thank you so much for joining us, and we remind you to listen to the voices. They are the indelible echoes of the indomitable spirit of this incredible island. We'll see you next time.